A year ago, it was all about AI and Gen AI, and then agents and agentic AI and agentic systems started popping up. So what I'm trying to do in the next 30 minutes or so, I'll try to demystify a little bit what agents are, how we see agents at KNIME, and how you can use data. Of course, that's one of our strengths, to make even better, to make good agents. What is an agent? Tons of definitions out there. You probably read a dozen of those yourself as well. You can ask ChatGPT. If you ask ChatGPT, you get something like this, and that's kind of the essence of what you typically hear. There's some sort of an agent, this mythical thing. It's somehow interacting with the environment. It's getting inputs. It's producing outputs to interact with the environment, and then it's doing this by using tools and sub-agents. So I said, I don't get it. ChatGPT, draw a picture of what this looks like. And this is what ChatGPT gave me. And it's essentially just saying, well, there's something, no matter how deep you dig, there's always going to be some magic at the end of the day. That can't be it either. Okay. So what I want to do is spend 10 minutes or so just to peek a little bit underneath the hood and decompose what these pieces are that an agent is actually built out of. It really boils down to their tools, their workflows, and then their agents that are used by other agents. Agentic AI in a nutshell, 2 slides. We're really talking a lot about tools. Tools get some stuff done. And not surprisingly, a lot of these tools are already floating around in your organization. They're already floating around at KNIME, and I'll show you a couple of examples of that later. They do things like aggregating data sources. They may do things like classify an image or predict the next action, stuff that we've been learned how to do over the last couple of decades, actually very well with machine learning, statistical, and just data engineering type of techniques, tools. Then we have things that are intelligent tools. And they somehow are the same, but somewhere in there. And this is a KNIME event, so we'll talk at KNIME workflows at some point in time. Somewhere in this KNIME workflow that's building this intelligent tool is going to be a node that's reaching out to something Gen AI-ish, probably an LLM or something. And somewhere in there is a prompt that instructs the Gen AI what to do. Right? So an intelligent tool has more or less clever prompts in there that define, that specify, that tell what it's supposed to do. Then we have AI workflows. This is the part where I've been struggling a little bit with Sasha. What do? We have KNIME workflows, but the AI community also talks about workflows. So we'll try to distinguish this a little bit by saying it's an AI workflow or it's a KNIME workflow. An AI workflow fundamentally just says there is a series of tools that will be called. Full stop. Some intelligent, some not so intelligent. Could be as simple as saying, get data on customer X, retrieve the tickets for this customer, and then summarize this email. This is probably one of the tools up there. We know how to do this. We reach out to a CRM or whatever system. We retrieve the tickets from somewhere else. And the summarization is probably an intelligent tool that uses an LLM to say, okay, here's a large body of stuff around that customer. Please summarize that into a simple paragraph, right? It could also be launched automatically to do something, and I'll show an example of this one as well. In addition to that, there's often this mentioning of memory, that agents learn, they store stuff, they remember stuff. They don't remember stuff, they do, but they remember stuff by storing it somewhere. That could be as simple as a file, could be a database, it could be just a document, and I'll show a couple of examples of that as well. Those are the ingredients, nothing agentic whatsoever here. It becomes agentic when we're looking at something that's now orchestrating this use of these tools dynamically. That's when it gets interesting. So we have an agent sitting up there, and the agent has access to a large tool repository, some standard tools, some intelligent tools, doesn't really matter that much. And typically it's not just 5, it's many, many more. And from that tool repository, when we now ask the agent to do something, or it somehow gets triggered to do something, maybe it's a prompt, maybe it just gets launched every night to do something autonomously. When that job, when it's asked to do something, it dynamically puts this AI workflow together. So it looks at the prompt, it looks at the input, it looks at whatever woke it up to say, okay, for this, in this situation, in this context, I should really start by using tool E. Then I'm going to use B and A together in parallel. I'm combining the output into C, and maybe I'm even going to loop around a little bit until I have enough stuff, until I'd recruited enough help to solve the problem I was asked to solve. And then I'm going to produce an output or interact with the environment or do something or take an action, whatever the last step then is. And this then results in agentic applications. That's the type of stuff when I'm interacting with this agent. Typically, it's some sort of a chat interface, but I think we should look a lot more broadly at other ways of interacting with agents, because chat is not everything. Already see this a little bit with Kai. We'll talk about that later today, but we'll also show an example where we're not using a chat interface, but a different way of interacting with an agent. And then, of course, and this is where it gets interesting, we can also use this agent to create an agentic service. And that agentic service can be launched automatically every night, but it can also be used as a tool. And that's where it gets cool, right? Because that means inside here are not just intelligent tools that are using GenAI as designed by a human, but inside here are agents that are solving a sub-problem of what the bigger agent is trying to get from, right? So it's really like the big overarching agent that everybody dreams about, the thing that looks over my shoulder and solves all of my problems before I even think of them. It's actually composed, lots of these tools, lots of intelligent tools, but also agents that are taking care of parts of the problem. So how does that relate to KNIME workflows? If you look at what tools could do, this is by far not an exclusive list, just a couple of examples. We could have a tool that translates text. We could have a tool that gets information about the user. We could have a tool that forecasts facility usage. I don't know. We could have a tool that just books the flight, right? Those up here are KNIME workflows. They can be KNIME workflows that are, we used to call this, we still call this, augmenting analytics, right? It's a KNIME workflow that's doing something in this middle example, translating a text. It's doing something with this text. And then it's going to reach out to a node that's calling an LLM. There's some prompt that tells the LLM what to do, translate this text. And probably a little bit more. Actually, prompt design is not that easy. And that's it. That's what this tool does, right? Those are examples of intelligent tools that you can model as a KNIME workflow. These types of tools, standard data aggregation type stuff, and we'll see some examples of that anyway. Getting information about a customer is a workflow that's reaching out to Salesforce, HubSpot, Zendesk, a couple of tools, puts this together and says, here's all of the information we have about that customer. This is predictive AI, predicting monthly growth, forecasting facility usage. The people that in this room that care about, or online that care about this type of stuff, they have already built workflows that do this, right? So you essentially take this workflow, turn it into a tool, which is just take the workflow and upload it somewhere so it can be used by agents. And then down here, that's probably stuff where you just point to Booking.com or Expedia or one of these travel sites that have a tool that allows you to automatically book travel, or you reach out to whoever you want to schedule ads with. So those are agents that are probably not necessarily modeled as KNIME workflows. You could, but the KNIME workflow is essentially just going to have one node that does a REST call. So if you want to do it like that, fine, but it's not a necessity. That's the one side. The other side are the types of services or applications that you're going to give people access to. There's a marketing tonality checker. It's a nice web page. I'm uploading the newest document. Actually, Gareth put something like this together for our marketing team. And it essentially says, yeah, we tend to not publish marketing material that uses seamless or lots of superlatives. We try to be a little bit more down to earth. That type of stuff automatically gets checked. Maybe you even get a revised version back already. Article summarizer, same story. Things like an image corrector, a news aggregator is probably something that's more used as a service by other tools, by other agents. And then you have things where, and at that point in time I ran out of examples, where it's really more complicated. They say, let's plan how to solve this problem and then execute these steps or do certain things in order. Those are data apps, and you'll see examples of that in a second. Or maybe in a minute, intelligent apps that are reaching out to, they're orchestrating some of these tools. They have some sort of an LLM inside. There's a more or less smart prompt inside that tells the agent what to do. These types of things are classic intelligent services that are deployed as a REST service, for example. And down here, it's a workflow. This is a KNIME workflow. And this is the interesting part, right? A KNIME workflow is essentially orchestrating, is defining the data flow. But it's on the side. Often you have bits and pieces. For those of you who touched KNIME workflows, there's also variables in there. And they tend to model a control flow, right? And Adrian likes to refer to this as the cognitive flow. The cognitive flow is essentially a control flow that says this tool, then this tool, then this tool, then this tool, right? That doesn't have to, but can also be a KNIME workflow. If you put all of that together, then you have this view, right? On one side, you have all of these tools, some workflows with augmented analytics, some do data aggregation, some are doing a bit of predictive AI, some orchestrate the use of other tools. And on the kind of human user-facing side, you have agentic applications or agentic services. It's interesting because that kind of turns the KNIME Hub into a tool repository, right? So on the KNIME Hub, you have all of these workflows that are representing tools. And I'll show you examples in a few minutes. It's actually not that complicated to turn something into a tool because it's the type of workflow that we've been building for a long time anyway. On the other side, the KNIME Hub also turns into an agent marketplace, right? You can deploy, just like you used to deploy data apps to all of your colleagues in the organization. Some of these data apps, well, they just act agentically now, right? Do more or less smart things. Some of them do pretty amazing smart things. And the same is true for REST workflows. I can now, of course, also deploy those as agentic services. If you do this right, nobody limits you to say it has to be a KNIME workflow. Like I said before, if you do this right, some of these agentic applications and services will use tools that are part of the tool repository, but are actually residing somewhere else, or you wrap it in a small KNIME workflow, up to you. And if you do the other part right, you can also use other agentic toolkits. So if someone in your organization already forces you to use some different agentic toolkits, nobody keeps you from using the KNIME Hub to play tool repository to provide some of the tools that these agents are using as well. So it goes both ways, opens it up very nicely. Good, enough high-level blah blah. What could this look like? So something we're building inside at KNIME that's helping us, everybody at KNIME, is the Ask Me Anything About KNIME agent. What is that? Well, let's ask it itself. If we ask it what it is, it's a chat interface. This is a KNIME data app, so it's a classic chat interface like you would expect. And it essentially says, I'm an internal data agent. I can give you information. Just ask questions about anything at KNIME, and you don't need to read all of this. It can give you information about customers, about the community, about users, but it can also give you information about people at KNIME, about KNIME employees. Sometimes it's, by the way, pretty wrong, but that's a typical problem with LLMs. What does this look like underneath the hood? This is the data app. Right, you don't need to understand all of these nodes. The data app is always modeled as a component, hence these two nodes at the beginning and the end. In this particular case, we're connecting to the hub, because on the hub, we have all of the tools. And then we're using, in this particular case, OpenAI. We could use DeepSeek. We could use some locally hosted AI. It doesn't really matter. This is just, I'm not even sure the version we are deploying at KNIME is using OpenAI, but different problem. And then over there, the interesting piece is the chat agent. That's where the magic happens. This is where we're getting all of the tools that are available. We're selecting the tools and say, okay, you, agent over there, those are the tools you can use. Okay, so this, fairly easy. What happens in here? What happens in here, the magic here is essentially the prompt. because the prompt will say, dear agent, you have access to these tools. This is what these tools are doing. This is how you can reach out to those tools. And this is who you are, and this is what we want you to do. And here's the question that you're supposed to answer. So we have two choices of putting together this prompt. Right? And everybody here probably has seen prompt engineering. What does this look like? You start off by a bit of a description. Who are you? Right? It's typically a little bit more than just saying you're a helpful assistant, but it's like, don't insult people, blah, blah, blah. You're doing this. You're a valuable colleague. This is the type of answer we're expecting. So quite a bit of context about the personality of the agent. And then you're saying, these are the tools. So what I can do is I can just tell the system, I can tell this agent, well, there's a tool that allows you to access the CRM system. We call it Salesforce. There's a tool that gives you access to the support tickets. We call it Zendesk. There's a tool, and so on. You get the idea, right? So we're essentially giving the agent access to each and every one of our technologies inside our tech stack. One way of doing that. Wouldn't it be nicer? And in the sense, a prompt is always something, if you don't like it, the LLM very likely won't like it either. Wouldn't it be nicer if you said, ignore the tools that we're using at KNIME. Here is a tool that gives you information about customers. Here's a tool that gives you information about users. Here's a tool that gives you information about the community. Here's a tool that gives you information about people working at KNIME, and so on. The left is extremely technology-centric, which is A, problematic, because you need to explain a lot what the hell is a CRM system. Right? Because the agent doesn't necessarily know this from the get-go, while over here we directly talk about, hey, if somebody asks about a customer, here's the tool that you can use to get more information. Maybe there's more than one tool, 2, 3 tools that give you information about customer. So the left is very technology-centric, and it also has the little tiny nasty problem that if you now decide, maybe not you, but IT decides we're going to switch the CRM system to something else, you need to touch each and every single prompt that's relying on that particular CRM system. Whereas if I'm doing this over here, which is much more information-centric, and focus on the actual relevant details, it's giving me tools that provide the information that I need. It's super easy to switch the technology. Right? I only need to touch my tool that's getting information about customers and say, okay, instead of accessing Salesforce, let's switch over to whatever we're using now. What could this look like? This is the customer information tool that we are using at KNIME. So there's a bit of here, this JSON stuff. If you ignore these two nodes and the node at the very back, that's essentially just interfacing so that the AI, the agent, can use it. That's a one way, pretty established way of interacting, of having agents interact with tools. So it's always the same. And then you see there's a Salesforce connector, gets some account summary. Down here, Amazon, the community hub is currently running on Amazon. So if you want that usage summary from there, we get it here. Then we are reaching out to Zendesk, HubSpot. If we decided to move the community hub to Azure, we would just need to change this down here, but we wouldn't need to touch any of the prompts that are using that. This is interesting for another reason as well, because we didn't build this for the agent. We built this years ago, and it was built by Iris's data and analytics team at KNIME, because it made it easier for anybody at KNIME to quickly put together a workflow that was doing something with customer data. We didn't need to teach everybody at KNIME that Salesforce and HubSpot know how to put all of this stuff together, but people started with all of this wrapped into a component where they could start working with a view on customer data at KNIME. Right? So all we needed to do is use this internal component that we've had for a while and turn that into a tool that now can be used by humans and by agents. Good. So the message I'm trying to make here, or the message that I'm trying to transport here, is that you will have everybody here has tons of different technologies, data silos where data is hidden, right? One thing that KNIME has done since the beginning very well is this data integration piece. Right? We have customers that all they do, and I don't want to diminish that, that's pretty cool, but all they do is essentially run workflows that constantly, every night, do data integrations and provide a unified view on the information that people actually want to work with. This is the type of stuff where on top of this data integration layer, you can build data-aware tools, like this CRM, the Customer Information Extractor, the HR system tool, the KNIME Forecaster. Those are not my new slides, by the way. That should be Customer Information Extractor, because it's exactly not using the CRM. Anyway, and then over here, of course, you have all of these AI systems, and however you use them, you can build intelligent tools that help you with writing, somehow pulling that together. One thing that the KNIME Hub also gives you is, okay, and these two tools then can be used, of course, to build cool agents. One thing that KNIME also offers you on the KNIME Hub side is to make sure that these tools don't just wildly use any AI that the tool designer at that point in time chose, but we can make sure the Hub forces these people to pick the AI that's right for them, right? You can have a gateway where you say, in our organization, we are only using these 3 AIs. One is locally hosted, one is run in a trustworthy cloud, one in a not so trustworthy cloud. And depending on the nature of the data, you can use only 1, 2, or 3 of these AIs. The real magic happens when we have data-aware intelligent tools, like this Ask Me Anything agent, Speak in One Voice with Assistant. I'll show that in a second. Good. The second example. This time I'll start on the opposite end. I'll show you some tools, and then I'll sketch the path into the future. So the goal here is to have KNIME speak in one voice. We don't care about how we communicate internally. It's not quite true. Since we started having an HR department, also I have to watch what I say inside. But anyway, that's not the point. Here the point is about making sure that anything that gets published to the outside world at KNIME, as a blog post, as a, I don't know what, as a marketing material, as evangelism posts, they kind of use the same tonality, the same way of talking, and they also make sure that we use the same style for graphics, and we also make sure we use we are aligned along terminology that we're using. So we probably need some tools that help us with that, right? So here's, again, you don't need to understand all of the workflow. This is a very simple workflow that essentially takes a text as an input, and it takes a black and a white list of terms that we do want to use or that we don't want to use when we talk about KNIME publicly. And then it returns a list of violations. This is just a tool, but no intelligence in here whatsoever. The next one is a little bit more intelligent tool that essentially also takes a text as an input, and then it does have some verbal description of tonality. We don't want to use long sentences, be casual, that type of stuff, right? It's a description of how we want to talk at KNIME. And then we're using, down here, an LLM to check that and point to violations. LLMs are really, really good at that. So now I have 2 tools. How can I use them? I can use them to every night run a check and then send emails in the morning. I said, Michael, I checked your last blog post that you published about agentic AI in KNIME. It stinks. It doesn't say that, right? Tonality checking. No, anyway, I didn't care, but Emilio, who wrote this, thought it would be impolite to be so rude. So we said, it does not pass our strict writing guidelines. Here's a couple of violations. And by the way, down here is an attachment with the rewritten text. Nice. It's really only calling 2 tools, not really all that agentic, right? It becomes agentic when I can do this. I can say, dear agent, you are wrong. I like to do that. Replying to emails and essentially pointing out flaws. The word automate is absolutely allowed, and at least I am allowed to use casual voice from time to time. So I sent this email back to my agent, and the agent replies politely, dear Michael, I updated my guidelines, and by the way, here's what I did. So I did remove a forbidden word from the blacklist, and I updated the guidelines, depending how much you want to see here, right? That's interesting. So how did we do this? We essentially have a set of tools. 2 of those you already saw, the terminology checker and the tonality checker. Those are tools that the agent is using. And in addition to that, we have a guidelines updater tool. And this thing gets triggered when an email is being sent back to the agent. Then the agent does a bit of blah blah with that email, and it uses an LLM, an AI, with a smart prompt to take this email apart and say, okay, this part refers to terminology, this part refers to tonality, and then it passes those parts on to two tools that are doing guideline updating. And the guidelines are stored in a black and a white list for terminology and in this guideline description document that we have as well. So those documents are being updated automatically. Here's the terminology updater, tonality updater, we have those as well. So if you want, you can later point out the flaw in this slide to me, if you can spot it. There's one mistake in there. It was made only for optical reasons. Good. What else do we want to do? This is not that cool, just terminology and bit of tonality, boring. But we can add to that, right? And we can add to that by, this is the checker workflow that gets triggered automatically every time a blog gets posted or something else pops up on the website or what else gets sent out to people. This is the tonality checker. This is the terminology checker. We could also check images for, okay, if you're using an infographic, this is the type of style we want to use. Or just generally for graphics, we do not allow pink in graphics. Whatever, right? You could be as simple as just checking for color palette, but it could also be much more complicated, checking for real stylistic elements. So we can add this here, and we already have it here. The image checker is there, it's doing some of those things. What we're lacking here, and we're still working on that, is the image guideline updater, right? So the message here is this constantly adapting style checker agent, which probably needs a little bit, this naming probably should have its own agent, making sure it gets a better name, but anyway. It's an observer of all outward-facing material. It's quiet, it's reliably working in the backend, and it's always learning. Right? It's constantly updating from that one, from feedback that it gets from its users. The agentic insight here is it's very easy to broaden the scope and the capabilities. If I want to add more modalities, I could even say, as part of the prompting, I could say there's different type of material that we're publishing. There's some more geeky stuff that essentially tells you this is how you do the nitty-gritty details and workflows. And then there's the more business people-facing marketing material. Treat those differently. All very easy to add, different tools, different guidelines, different types of things to check. So all you need to do is add checker and updater tools. And at some point in time, you probably don't want to do this hard-coded the way we are currently doing all of the tool coding, but just hand that to an AI. Just say, for this type of document, which kind of things do you even need to check? As long as we're only checking for 6, 7 things, it's fine. We can just run it all. But at some point in time, this will grow beyond that, and we'll have 100 little checker agents. And then we'll just make sure that an AI picks the ones that for this type of content are actually worth calling. This is where, remember my little remark at the beginning about memory? This agentic system has a memory, right? It's a very simple memory. In the current case, it has a list of blacklist and a whitelist of words that we want to use, don't want to use. And it has this guideline specification. The moment we start doing images, it probably needs more. We could have example images where we keep adding example images to the memory. We could even have personal memory, where we say, and in addition, for Michael's post, if it comes from Michael, there's an extra set of rules that it needs to obey for. It needs to be particularly weird, I have no idea, right? Something like that. So you could have personal memory as well. You could say for evangelism, type stuff, there's an evangelism memory for some types of aspects that we're checking that. If the developers are publishing something, again, a different type of memory. Good. What does this really mean? That's another topic that often comes up for the skills that people need that are working with data and with AI. Right? Because I tried to allude to this a couple of times. Writing prompts becomes part of what people now need to do. You're not just building workflows, KNIME workflows, or chaining tools, AI workflows, but these intelligent tools, at the bottom of it, the agent that's supposed to know what it's supposed to do, that's part of the prompts that you're writing. So some of the logic, some of the specification of what this agent is supposed to do is actually coded, dare I say to use the word here, coded inside the prompt. It's just coded in natural language. So in the old days, anyway, we had a data team, right? And the team had these kind of skills, data engineering, statistics, machine learning, visualization. We know all of this stuff. Then there were blueprints created that were handed over to this omnious citizen data scientists. They could do some data exploration, a little bit of easy stuff, maybe blueprint customization. But fundamentally, at the end, we had domain experts that were using data applications, dashboards, services, that type of stuff. And underneath the hood, there was, of course, a governance topic. And the governance topic had to do with data, with model governance, model monitoring, these types of things. Nothing new. Now that we're turning this into a data and an AI team, we are adding skills here. First of all, we need to teach people how to build tools. And as I said, some of the tools, some of the non-intelligent tools, like data aggregation tools, predictive AI type tools, you probably already have them. We have a lot of those that we just grab from the data team. But the prompt engineering piece is a super important one. People need to understand, how do I write a prompt so it actually gets stuff done properly? This is going to be interesting, because at some point in time, we need to debug prompts. I don't know, when we were building this Ask KNIME Anything application, we continue to build that one. Sometimes it's obvious that the AI is doing not quite the right thing, but you don't quite know how to fix it, right? It's somewhere in this prompt, but anyway, so debugging prompts is going to be interesting. So it's not just writing them, but also constantly improving them, making them better. These will create agents, agent templates, and then over here, these citizen data scientists, they can customize them a little bit. Maybe they take the tools and just say, in my case, for what I care about, the Ask My Organization Anything doesn't need a community tool because we don't have a community, whatever. Or we don't want that AI to answer questions about our employees, so there's not going to be an employee tool as part of it. So you customize that by changing top tools, or just connect to a different data source inside these tools. And by maybe editing prompts slightly. But again, I think editing prompts is, you very quickly open a can of worms. And I can also customize by context provisioning. And that essentially means that if I want an agent that helps me with stuff, it needs a knowledge base to work on top of, right? And by changing what that knowledge base looks like, you're going to get answers based on that knowledge base, right? So that's another way of customizing an already existing agentic framework. And that then results in agentic application services, and they have chat and other interfaces. And I mean, I don't know if you noticed, this email idea is already a little bit of a different interface. You're chatting kind of offline with the agent. To me, this is one of the most important trends that's currently going on, is what other interfaces are we going to see? I have no idea. So if you have ideas about what kind of interfaces we'll start seeing, where we interact somehow, or where agentic systems work with us, we work with them, I'd be very curious to learn more about that, maybe tonight after a beer. And then, of course, on the government side, we now have AI safeguarding issues, consumption control. Those types of topics are popping up as well that you need to add to this governance compliance stack. With that, what I wanted to cover a little bit, I hope we could peel a couple of layers back from this agentic systems, give you an idea. The point here really is agentic systems are hybrid. There's a lot of tools, predictive AI workflows that we have been building over the years already. They can be repurposed as tools fairly easily and give the agents, the agentic systems, that's pretty powerful tools at the end. Other tools will embed Gen AI. Remember this augmented analytics that we used to call that? That's where the prompt engineering piece becomes even more interesting. There's also a prompt aspect here as well, right? Because all of these tools need descriptions. If those descriptions aren't good, not well written, the poor agent has no idea which tools to use for what. So it's not just the prompt that I need to put into the agent, this is who you are, this is what I expect you to do, but I also need to describe these tools extremely well. Part of the prompt engineering piece. Agents can and should start small, in my opinion, right? You start with something focused, you start with something that's maybe not quite as intelligent as you'd like to have it at the beginning, like this tonality checker thing that we have. Right now it's fairly basic, but adding more capabilities underneath the hood, so you just keep adding tools, adjust the prompt, and the agents become, over time, more versatile and smarter over time. And to me, I'm a computer scientist by training. Remember this object-oriented programming, microservice architecture was always the same idea. You decompose the problem into smaller manageable pieces, and then they together, you have almost this emergent cool behavior. I remember one of the first object-oriented programs that I wrote. I really did it by the book when I learned this. At the end of the day, I was writing very simple stuff. And at some point in time, I was like, I'm done. And I launched it, and it worked. And it did something much cooler. And the same is even more true for agents, right? You start with something where you say, okay, this is not yet that mind-boggling, but by adding tools, by adding more capabilities, by adding more modalities, it becomes truly smart. And at some point you say, this is cool what it's doing there. So it's almost like some emergent behavior. So this is, I think, what it should look like. You start with smaller agents, and then you pile them up, and then they all stand on the shoulder of bigger and bigger giants. Thank you very much.